Welcome back to Inside City Hall. With the race for mayor well underway, candidates have been looking for ways to get their message out, attending multiple forums, but unable to do the same type of in-person campaigning we would usually see less than 5 months out from primary day. But the crises facing our city loom larger every day, and so we're going to bring all the candidates back to Inside City Hall to talk about them. My guest tonight is Wiley, a lawyer and civil rights advocate who served as counsel to Mayor Bill de Blasio and later as chair of the city's Civilian Complaint Review Board. She joins us now to talk about how the campaign has been going. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you, Errol, but I would have preferred to hear your pre-show music.
Can't play that without paying royalties, so the audience will never hear it. Let me ask you something. Andrew Yang announced today that he has tested positive for COVID. Did that surprise you, and what steps are you taking to stay safe while campaigning?
Yeah, well, first let me say I really hope Andrew Yang is symptom-free and has a speedy recovery, and sending him warm wishes. We as a campaign have been taking every precaution to protect public health, because that's job one for all of us as New Yorkers. And that means to the extent we have meetings, we have them outside or socially distanced with less than 5 people inside. And we've been doing a lot virtually, obviously, and making sure that we're engaging with as many New Yorkers as possible, including having, and we've had already 7 people's assemblies, which are opportunities for any New Yorker who wants to join the conversation, who does not have to endorse or support me to join, to share their priorities, their needs, what they want to see from the next administration, and their ideas and innovations too, because so many of our residents actually have ideas about how to solve our problems, and we're listening.
You're doing those people's assemblies digitally, virtually?
Correct. And one of the great things about it is it enables residents to also hear from each other from across boroughs. You know, it's actually, I'd much rather we did not have COVID, but one benefit of virtual is that we can have conversations across communities and boroughs and bodies of water that are much harder and much less likely when we meet in person.
Absolutely. You released an economic plan today that's modeled on some elements of the 1930s New Deal. The centerpiece that caught my eye is this massive infrastructure spending plan in which the city would borrow $10 billion and use it to do a lot of different things. You had $2 billion for climate resilience and $2 billion for public housing, $2 billion for digital infrastructure, some for culture workers and so forth. You had one category, though, $1 billion for social infrastructure. What would that mean?
Well, look, first let me say that it's $10 billion that I can spend without asking for anyone else's permission or money. And that's important because I think I'm the only candidate in this race that has a proposal that is not reliant on anyone else and would create 100,000 jobs. Which we desperately need and what we can do. But what I mean by social infrastructure is, remember that education, childcare, human service delivery, recreational space is a deep part of how we create and make room and space and opportunity for what we have to do to care and support one another. And so part of what we would do, obviously, is make sure that we're fast-tracking projects that have been waiting in the pipeline that will solve some problems. I've heard in Southeast Queens, there have been years of demand for a community center. Community centers solve a lot of problems. They're social problems, including giving people places to recreate, exercise. That's everything from public health to public safety. The other thing is resiliency in the form of climate change is important, but it's also about what kinds of opportunities that gives us to do other good things, like, for instance, have protected bike lanes. Some communities, including in the South Bronx, we're hearing a demand for that. But it's also room and space for things like childcare. And I'm going to be coming out shortly with proposals on how we not only recover the economy, but we recover the people who are our frontline workers.
But let me ask you something. I mean, something you said kind of makes me a little bit hesitant. When you say this is $10 billion you wouldn't have to ask anybody for, I mean, you're talking about selling bonds, so you've got to get some Wall Street houses involved, and somebody's got to buy those bonds. The pension funds, wealthy individuals, and whoever else wants to buy those bonds are probably going to ask, just as they would do if you wanted to build a bridge, they want it to be secured by some kind of stream of revenue, right? Normally it would be the bridge and tunnel tolls or something like that, or some dedicated tax. What would be the path to repaying the people from whom you would borrow this money?
Well, let me just start, Errol, by saying, like, we don't propose anything in a Maya Wiley team that is not stress tested with economists. And we have economists who looked at it and blessed it as smart and good borrowing. And a lot of it is because it is stimulative. And a big important piece of this is some of this money is actually existing money, because we spend, one of the problems with how city government runs is that the money doesn't get spent. It gets approved, projects get approved, and then they languish for years. And part of what we have to do is fast track that spending because it is stimulative. And the other thing is, so we're not borrowing a full 10 billion, but we are going to borrow more, but it is within the guidelines. It is within smart, sustainable borrowing. And because we're bringing revenue back into our coffers with the ways that we are spending those dollars. And that's why it works.
I mean, I can't tell you how many playgrounds I've visited where the local council member tells me it took them, almost 10 years to build a bathroom and some monkey bars. I mean, you're talking about doing something much bigger than that. Do you have the wherewithal to find the efficiencies and make these projects work?
Yes, I do. Number one, because I'm going to have a New Deal New York czar. When I was counsel to the mayor, one of the things I'm so proud of is that we showed city government how to do something it had never done before, which was get every single unit in Queensbridge houses free broadband, paid for by the city. I put in a $70 million capital construction budget line in the budget. City had never had it before. But I had to get 4 different agencies working together because A, there was not one agency responsible for universal broadband because the city had never done it before. And we had to make it work, make city partner with itself, make the different departments work together, and we got it done. And that is the point, having leadership that sees the vision, moves the barriers out of the way, and makes it happen.
Okay. Stand by, Maya Wiley. We're going to take a short break. We'll hear more from candidate Maya Wiley in just a minute. Stay with us.
New York City weather can be beautiful, inconvenient, and at times powerful.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. I'm once again joined by mayoral candidate Maya Wiley. And I wanted to ask you about education. You co-chaired a panel that was the de Blasio administration's effort to try and deal with our segregated schools. The current mayor asked for that report, but has more or less announced that he's not going to be doing very much with it. He's not going to be asking Albany to change the SHSAT. It's not clear what's going to happen with gifted and talented programming. Can you promise not to back down in the face of political pressure on this particular question?
Yeah, Errol, I am running to be the next mayor of New York City because we need a change maker. It is time that we be bold and transformational because so much is broken, and our schools need to see every single one of our children as excellent, and we need to be a 22nd century education system. We need to be at the leading edge. Right now, we're a 19th century education system. I'm going to stand by all of what we recommended in our school diversity advisory group reports because we did it transparently. We did it with all the stakeholders at the table, and going into every single borough, we had over 800 people engaged in public meetings, and that is a good process. But let me just say one other thing. The thing that I'm hearing from parents every day is that they are worried about how they get this year back for their students, for their children. And we can do that if we also recognize that COVID has blown the walls of the box wide open. It's not the same old system, and we have the opportunity to innovate faster and in creative ways that parents and students will be excited about if we lean into doing things differently and recognizing that vacancy gives us an opportunity for smaller class size. If we recognize that online learning gives us an opportunity to get more kids more access to courses that may not have been in their schools, we have to get them online. And that's something I have done inside city government, and it's something I did at the New School as we were working on digital equity in the digital equity laboratory I founded, and it is simply a crying shame and disgraceful that we haven't gotten that done for our public school kids, particularly our children who are homeless, and we'll fix that.
So, something you talked about in your public safety section of your campaign website, which I guess it crosses over into education as well. You've talked about cognitive and behavioral therapy for public school kids. What would that look like?
You know, this is important because, and I want to reflect back to Gloria Passamino's reporting on AOC, because what she was talking about in trauma, those traumas are exactly what CBT, cognitive behavioral and dialectical behavioral therapies, are proven therapies for. That can also be witnessing gun violence, that can be being abused at the home, any of the kinds of traumas that far too many of our kids experience, there are therapies for. So what it means, first of all, is having student support teams in our schools that include having a social workers. We do want counselors in our schools, not cops, because that's what our kids need. And it also means ensuring that those support teams are identifying the kids that need these services and that we're investing in the community-based services so that they can be presented to kids who need them and their families. And so that's what we will do in our gun violence prevention policy. And it's also what we'll do for all our children, because as we know, COVID has created its own trauma, and we need trauma-informed care that is part of the educational opportunity that our kids need. Because when they're traumatized, it actually impacts how well they do in school. And so we have to recognize that those services are part of what's going to help all our kids be excellent.
Okay, we're going to leave it there for now. We will see you out on the campaign trail and wish you the best of luck as we get closer and closer to primary day. Thanks for spending some time with us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, Errol. Stay safe and well.
You too. Let's take a break here. Coming up next, for once after a major winter storm, New Yorkers seem to be satisfied with the sanitation department's cleanup efforts.